All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming this afternoon. We appreciate it and the interest. We're excited to share a little bit more about the North River Fieldhouse. We're going to be specifically talking about the Victus study. We've got Brian Connolly with us tonight, and I'm Alec Johnson, Redevelopment Director for City of Fort Wayne. And we'll probably be finished up here, just so everybody knows, as you're deciding how long you want to stay or not. We're probably about 45 minutes all told for tonight. So we're going to get started, and I'd love to introduce the Executive Director for Visit Fort Wayne, Jill Boggs. There she is.
Hi, good afternoon, late afternoon. Thank you, Alec. We are happy to host the presentation from Victus Advisors today. Founder Brian Connolly has a wealth of experience in research and analysis of sports and recreation venues, and he is well known and highly regarded in our industry for providing, unbiased insights into what does and does not work for communities. As an organization that values research, our marketing and destination development initiatives depend on it. And we are grateful to the City of Fort Wayne and to the Fort Wayne Redevelopment Commission for contracting with Victus on this sports study, feasibility study. It is an additional validation, if you will, of the study that Visit Fort Wayne conducted to create our 10-year tourism master plan for Fort Wayne and Allen County. And that plan includes sports tourism and sports investment as initiatives that are critical element to the growth of our destination. The Victus study allows us to work together to find the most strategic ways to increase our competitive advantage in sports tourism and to increase visitor spending in our local economy through the increase of sports enthusiasts, additional sports enthusiasts traveling to our destination. Sports tourism is one of the fastest growing sectors in the travel industry. It is the most sustainable with the growth of the sports tourism industry and the most resilient. Rest assured, other communities, other states, other countries are hustling to make their destination grow, to cash in on that bigger piece of the visitor spending pie, if you will. Before Brian shares highlights with us, I would like to welcome Mayor Sharon Tucker, and I would like to thank her. She's going to say a few words. Thank her for her support of the continued growth of sports tourism in Fort Wayne. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate your support, and working together with you and the team has been great. And it's been a great experience for our city, all the attraction that you've been able to attract to our community. So thank you for your continued support and partnership. That's the key part, partnership. And thank you all for everyone that's here with us today. It is good to see all the familiar faces in the room to learn more about this tremendous opportunity that the city of Fort Wayne has. And I am personally very glad, very proud of the project, and want to share just a little bit with you, tell you about how we got to this point. We've had many conversations of what we could do with this plot of land that the city of Fort Wayne owns, right? It is our land that was purchased a while back. And we've thought much about what can we do that will make a huge dent in the value that we bring to our community. What can we do that will also widen our tax base and bring people into our community to help us grow? And then what can we do to speak to our one thing that we love? Fort Wayne, making it family-friendly, fun, and safe. And so when we found out and had the Victus study, we knew that creating this opportunity, the Sports Academy on this plot of land that's owned by us, is the way that we needed to go. And so we're very, very proud to be able to continue working, moving forward to see this project come to fruition. But the thing that's most important that I want you to know, that it wasn't done in the dark, it wasn't done at night. We had a tremendous amount of studying that was done. We had some hard conversations and information shared with us, and you will learn that today as we move forward. So Brian's analysis was critical. in helping us come to the point that we are at today. And without the data and without the design and without the conversation, we would not be here today. I do want you to know that this is the project that the city of Fort Wayne is supporting. Contrary to many things that you may be hearing out in the public, this is the one we're most proud of, and we look forward to working together with you to bring this to fruition. Brian? Right there. There he is. There he is.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Jill. My name is Brian Connolly. I am the founder and managing principal of Victus Advisors. I founded this firm a little over 13 years ago, and I believe the first analysis I did in Fort Wayne was probably 2014, 2015. So a lot of experience in this community, as well as more than 150 communities across the country where we've done this type of research and analysis over the past 13 years. In terms of what we were tasked to do here in Fort Wayne, starting last year, our approach was about a 14-week process of research and analysis. So as you'll see on this chart, it's broken into two primary phases. Phase one was the sports tourism market demand analysis. That was about an 8 to 10 week timeline focused on secondary market research, primary market research, community engagement, regional event organizer engagement, comparable analysis, all put together to analyze what is the opportunity, if any, for Fort Wayne in the indoor sports event space. From there, we developed a recommended model based upon the market research and demand profile and spent another 4 to 6 weeks on phase two, which was our usage projections, operating model, economic and fiscal impact analysis to really quantify what this type of facility does and can do for the community. Just to reiterate, which I think the vision for this project, for this study as well, was always focused on the North River site. So obviously the city put out a RFQ in the past couple of weeks, specifically focusing on public-private partnership opportunities to not only build this sports event center or field house on the site, but also looking at development opportunities around the site that could really turn this into something new in Fort Wayne, not just replicating what's downtown, but creating a sports tourism destination with not just the facility, but restaurants, family entertainment, hotels, all those types of things that when you travel to a community for a sports event, you and your family want to have access to and take part in. I think you've already heard, and Jill mentioned it a couple times, the word sports tourism. And I always like to, when I make these presentations, that means to us in the sports and recreation facilities planning industry. Sports tourism, simply put, is regional or national travel to observe or participate in a sporting event. The vast majority of the sports tourism industry, and you can see the annual spending going back about to 2015 in the U.S. on sports tourism. The vast majority of that is not the Super Bowl. It's not the Olympics, which might be held here once every 20 years. The vast majority of that is youth and amateur sports. It's traveling to participate in basketball tournaments, volleyball tournaments, cheer competitions, soccer tournaments. It's things that many people in this room either participated in themselves when they were youth athletes, or that their children today participate in or grandchildren participate in. So it's something that I would say most of the people in this room have had at least one experience in their lives where they've traveled with a child or a grandchild to a community, spent a night or two in a hotel, spent money in the restaurants, and they can think themselves, oh yeah, I have contributed economic impact as a sports tourist in Indianapolis or wherever that might be. So it's something people can really connect to, because as a sports tourism visitor, that economic impact is captured via hotel nights, restaurants, retail, entertainment, attractions, all of the places that tourists of any kind will spend money in a community. So it's really important that these types of developments that are anchored by a sports tourism facility are designed to be welcoming places Sports tourism, hospitality destinations is the fancy phrase we like to use for that. But that they're welcoming destinations where people can come in, they park, and then they don't have to get back in their car for the next 2 days. There's hotels nearby. There's restaurants nearby. They can walk or Uber to downtown. And it's an experience that they want to come back to. Jill also mentioned the resilience of this industry. You can see here, there was steady growth from about 2015 to 2019. COVID hit, which didn't entirely knock down the industry. If you all can remember what seems like 20 years ago now, back to the summer of 2020, the only tourism that really seemed to be going on was families that were traveling for outdoor sports, for soccer, for lacrosse, for flag football, for those types of venues. And we've seen a continued growth in this sector in large part because back then, that fall of 2020 in particular, a lot of local hoteliers were coming to their CVBs, to their economic development agencies, to their cities and saying, youth sports kept us afloat this past summer. How do we invest more in that? How can we make that a bigger priority to us? And the same thing with Main Street businesses, restaurants and shops and things like that. So as you can see, it rebounded quite quickly, and by 2022, it was back on that growth trajectory that was established there. So it tends to be a industry where even when there's an economic downturn, even when families might be cutting their budgets for vacations, for example, they don't cut their children's sports. And so at a lot of times, even during an economic downturn, the tournament might turn into the vacation, where you might go a day early, stay a day later, so that you can maximize your travel budget even during downturns. In terms of all of the research we went through, I'm just going to give you a couple highlights of some of the key takeaways, and then I'm going to talk about our conclusions and projections. So we start by looking at the indoor sports facilities that are currently available in the local market. And keep in mind that our primary focus for this study was to study the market for an indoor sports tourism facility. So the primary focus was, how do we capture economic impact through indoor tournament activity? Then after that, after we recommend a facility that can capture that, we look at whether there's local use that can fill in primarily during the week. So we call those hybrid facilities, where the primary focus is to build something that it's going to be filled in the weekends on tournaments, but you have another 4 or 5 days a week that are going to be focused on local use features and amenities. So we compiled primary facilities in the Fort Wayne, Allen County area that have multi-use indoor courts. And so you can see this a little bit small here, but there is no facility, and this is the multi-use courts category, in the entire market that has more than 6 courts. Why this is important is any new sports tourism, sports tournament-focused indoor facility that we've worked on, honestly, in the last 6-7 years at least, has to have a bare minimum of 8 basketball courts, which are typically convertible via overlay to 12 to 16 volleyball courts. More and more, if you can't get into that 8 to 12 court range, if you have 4 courts or 6 courts, it's going to be harder to attract the larger tournaments that can have 100+ teams that come for a weekend and stay 2 nights in the market and drive really significant economic impact. So the obvious first thing we found when looking at this inventory is there's Sport One Parkview Fieldhouse has 6 courts. There's a planned facility in New Haven that only has 5, but those are not what we would classify as modern sports tourism facility inventories of courts. So it should also be noted that Spees Fieldhouse for a long time, which is now Ace Pickleball Club, took 6 courts and a primary a facility that, going back to the early 2000s, was one of the first facilities, honestly, not just in the Midwest, but in the country, that really started to dive headfirst into that sports tournament business. A new owner bought it and converted it to pickleball court. So one of the things we heard as we did our local research for this study is Forgetting the sports tournament side of this, there's a lot of folks who are looking for new court time to replace what they lost at Spies. So from a local use standpoint, there is absolutely an opportunity to fill those. And then when you look at continued growth in local sports, there's an opportunity for more courts from a local use on top of that. From a tournament standpoint, the primary tournament activity happening on a 6-court or a 4-court are what we would call smaller tournaments that might be local or regional, may or may not have an overnight stay attached to it. When you get into 8, 10, 12 basketball, 16 to 24 volleyball, you can have hundreds of teams that come and stay for multiple nights. And really to have a single place where tournaments don't have to split up across, that don't have to try to piece together one court here, 3 courts there, 3 courts there, 3 courts there to try to make a tournament work. They want it all in one building and one destination. And that also provides a location and a destination that people like to come visit, like to play in, and want to come back to. We also took a hard look at competitive and comparable sports tourism facilities in, as you'll see here, primarily in the Midwest. So these are facilities that, from our experience, we know have been built. One of these is currently being built, but with the focus of truly being a sports tourism destination and a indoor sports tourism facility. This is a list of those facilities. You can see Alabama, Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Ohio, Illinois. All of these facilities have at least 8 and up to 14 basketball courts, and those courts are convertible to up to typically 14 to 24 volleyball courts. So what that means is you could have, during the week you might have if you have 10 courts, for example, you might have 6 basketball courts going at the same time that you have 8 volleyball. So those other 4 basketball would be convertible to 8. And you can balance and juggle that during the week. But then on the weekends, that gives you the ability to go after a very large, 24-court volleyball tournament that might be multiple days, drawing people from 6, 7, 8-hour drive time away. Or a basketball tournament that needs 10 or 12 courts. And also that flat floor space is very large and can also be used for wrestling meets, cheer competitions, pickleball tournaments, like anything that you can set up on a flat hardwood space that's that large. There's lots of other opportunities for creative sports event creation. Research on the local market, the competitive market. We did what we call a sports tourism SWOT analysis. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of Fort Wayne as an indoor sports tournament destination, and then what are the opportunities and threats as Fort Wayne looks to move into that market? So when we look at sports, kind of some established rules, so to speak, that have been developed through research and information from groups such as Sports ETA, which is a dedicated group of sports commission professionals that run the Association for Sports Events and Tourism. But there's kind of 4 things that have always been talked about as the primary drivers for why sports events decide to go to a community. Number 1 is the quality of the sports venues itself. So it's not just the quality, it's also the quantity and inventories of the playing spaces. So even if it's outdoors, if a large soccer organization needs 20 soccer fields to do a large tournament, if you don't have those 20 soccer fields, preferably all in one location in one facility, they're not even going to answer your call. They're not going to reach out to you. They're starting off by narrowing down to who can accommodate all our needs in one building. 10, 12 years ago, you would find more organizations that would be willing to piece together. And if you have any homegrown groups that only want to host tournaments in your market, they're going to piece together fields or courts in different places in the community to make that work because they really want to be there. But all the other events that are out there or could be coming here, you're just not going to be on their list. So you have to have the quality and quantity when it comes to these sports venues. Honestly, I like to say that's really number 1, and then the other 3 are kind of 2A, 2B, and 2C. And that's proximity and access. So is the location of the site something that's convenient for people to access if they're driving from 4, 5, 6, 7 hours away? The typical sports tourism family is not just the athlete, but the athlete and their parents and their brother and sister traveling in the minivan, driving from 4, 5, 6 hours away. And so you want it to be a community that's located where if you draw those drive time ranges, you're able to capture other big markets. And it's not about your community necessarily being Chicago or being Indianapolis. It's about your community being located in a place where people 6 hours this way can come to the middle and meet groups 6 hours this way. So they're 12 hours apart, but they can meet in the middle and get, face the best competition. So in our full report, we have a map that shows that for Fort Wayne, there's over 45 million people that live within a 5 to 6 hour drive time range of Fort Wayne. And many, many large markets in the Midwest are very conveniently located within that 4 to 6 hour drive time range of Fort Wayne. So that's an opportunity to be a sports tournament hub. One of the things I like to say about 2A, 2B, 2C here is, number one, the events will come the first time if you have the facility that can meet all their needs in one place. What gets them coming back year after year and even signing long-term agreements to come, for 3 years, for 5 years, whatever that might be, is these three elements: the proximity and access, the hotels and amenities, not just in the community, but on the site. Everything being in one place is becoming more and more important. And then the fourth piece is the reputation and brand of the community. So what that means is not just, if we work for some communities that are beach communities or, have a national park right nearby. Those are things that are always going to be attractive. But when we talk about reputation and brand for sports tourism, it's about when you do have events come there, you do a good job, you roll out the red carpet for them, the community is excited for them to be there, and it becomes a place that people want to come back to, and it becomes a community that does a great job hosting, and the reputation of that community as a sports destination becomes known throughout the region. This is what I like to show, where over the last 13 years, we've done tens of thousands of online surveys with members of the sports, the local sports communities across those 150 or so destinations that we've worked with. And so what we ask those participants, and usually it's parents or coaches that are responding to these surveys, one of the things we ask them is, what is your favorite sports community to go to for sports tournaments, and why? As you can see, the reason for choosing the best sports community is not the beach, it's not the national park, it's the quality of the sports facility. This number, every single survey across the country, no matter where it is, comes in somewhere between 70 to 75% on every single survey we do. It's about the quality of the sports facility. That's where, when they're here, they're spending all day, for 2 days, for 3 days, whatever that might be, in that facility. That's what their kids are participating in. That's what they're spending the most time in and around and doing. So that the quality of that sports facility is the number one reason. After that, this line is always number two. There's not been a single survey where this wasn't at least 70% and where this wasn't number two, somewhere in that 7 to 10% range all across the country. And this is, again, something I tell communities. 81% of this has nothing to do with your geographic location or the things about your community that you can't change or focus on. These are things that you control. And number two, I think, is really an interesting factor to me, because if you're a community that celebrates sports, if you're a community that has a lot of children that participate in sports, even if your community has certain sports that you're very passionate about, those are going to be the ones that you're most successful with. If you have we've worked in communities where, like in Maryland, for instance, where lacrosse was huge, and in some cases you can say, oh yeah, basketball is the number one sport in the country for youth participation, and there's going to be some market for that. But if you can become the best lacrosse destination in the country, and people in your community care about that, and there's teams here that people from outside the community want to come play and test themselves again, and when people are there, people that run the restaurants or own a shop nearby are excited because they're lacrosse fans too, and the local newspaper, when the family wakes up the morning after the first day, and then the newspaper is at their door in the lobby of the hotel, they see a picture of their kid on the front page because the community is excited that they're there. That experience to the destination is the second most important thing to these people beyond the facility. After that, you get into the ease of travel that we talked about, nearby family entertainment options, hotel and lodging, again, nearby, restaurant and dining nearby. Climate weather barely registers. So, I work with a lot of communities, some bigger than Fort Wayne, some smaller than Fort Wayne. And I tell them, you're not necessarily at a disadvantage because you don't have the Great Wolf Lodge or you don't have the beach or whatever that might be. If you can build a great sports facility and have a community that's passionate about being a host for those, that's 80% of the battle. So in terms of how being positioned to attract indoor sports events, these are those 4 categories again: indoor sports tourism venues, proximity and access, lodging and attractions, reputation and a brand. The big red X on top is simply indicating that there is no facility with at least 8 to 12 basketball courts convertible to 1624 basketball or volleyball courts in the community. That's where Fort Wayne needs to be to make to drive significant economic impact in the sports tourism industry. Number 2, proximity and access. As I mentioned, there's over 45 million people that live within a 5-hour drive time of Fort Wayne. So the ability to draw people to Fort Wayne that may live in Indianapolis, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, all these markets that surround Fort Wayne within a 5 to 6 hour drive time range is a huge opportunity. That is a number, 45 million people, that really shows to the unique positioning of Fort Wayne within the region. That's a number we typically only see in the Northeast Corridor in terms of population density. And it's something that is unique to Fort Wayne in terms of how it's positioned within a number of large markets in the Midwest. Lodging and attractions. Looking at the North River site, there's numerous lodging options, near the project site, within a mile of the project site, plus the potential development. Again, there's an RFQ out to get proposals for that. But I know there's been discussion for a while now on how there could be an opportunity for a hotel or potentially even multiple hotels on the site to help support the facility. And Fort Wayne already has quite a few appealing family attractions, museums, a zoo. The Science Center that's literally next door to the site is a really premier family science center in the Midwest. So those are all things that are attractive from a sports tourism standpoint. And then the last one is that reputation and brand. And this is supposed to be a work in progress emoji. And what, I say work in progress because Visit Fort Wayne is already here, already established, well-funded, has a national reputation for being really good at what they do. And we know from interviewing with them, doing interviews with them and looking at their new tourism master plan, which Jill mentioned, they've identified and are already focusing on establishing this market as a sports tourism destination. They're already doing quite a bit with outdoor sports where you have more field inventory available and facilities available. And they've told us, they just need the facility to compete in the sports tourism space and for indoor sports, and they're ready to go out and start attracting interest and help hosting those events in terms of helping to roll out the red carpet for the people who come. And so really when I say work in progress, it's really about having the facility to market, and then it's also just you get them to come once, and then year by year you bring them back, and that reputation and brand of for basketball teams, for volleyball teams, for cheer teams, for wrestling meets, for whatever that might be, that this is the place you want to be if you want to put on a really good, really successful event and have all of your members and teams and participants say, hey, that was a really great place to go for this event. We'd love to go back next year. What we did as part of our research was try to build out and this isn't every possible interested group, but we talked to a mix of local groups and regional event organizers in terms of a lot of basketball, a lot of volleyball, and those are really the two largest opportunities for any indoor sports facility because of participation levels throughout the country for youth and amateur athletes. So we talked to a pretty heavy sample of basketball and volleyball. We also talked to some pickleball groups, futsal as well, which is an indoor version of soccer played on hard courts. And really, this is not every possible user, but we wanted to get a sense of what type of interest there would be in a sports tourism facility and what their requirements might be. So out of the 11 or 12 we spoke with, all but one said that they would likely or definitely be interested in using this facility, which is a very strong response. A lot of them will kind of hedge their bets and say, well, possibly, probably not, just depending on the location and the market. But the interest here was really strong. And you can see, in terms of courts, there was interest in up to, basketball groups, minimum. We found about a minimum of at least 10 courts just from the sample we spoke to. Volleyball, interested in kind of a minimum of at least 16 courts for events. Also pickleball groups, we're looking at 20 to 24 courts. When you think about those overlays, that's another thing. Pickleball courts can usually be overlaid 3-to-1 on a basketball court. So if you have 12 basketball, that could be converted to 24 volleyball or 36 pickleball. So the opportunities are really large, and even wrestling mats. I would say on a 12-court basketball facility, you could probably do 20 plus wrestling mats on that. Cheer and dance competitions, you could set up multiple stages. There's a lot of opportunities for other use beyond even this small sample we surveyed. So we found the interest level just from that sample to be quite strong. These 11 groups had initial interest in potentially about 27 of weekend events combined. Not all of those would end up coming, but there's also plenty more tournament organizers out there that could bring events as well. But it gives us a sense on an initial scan, is there a market here? And our takeaway from all our experiences, there absolutely is. In terms of what this is a plan that's similar to what we're recommending. This was an early floor plan for a project in Williamsburg, Virginia, that is now under construction and is targeted to open next year. What you see there is about 160,000 square feet building. And this is an early concept plan. The plan has changed some since then. The city's added some event and meeting space and some recreation and play space and things like that have expanded the footprint. Essentially, this lobby area has now popped out quite a bit more to add in some of these other local use amenities. But the original concept, this is about 160-ish thousand square feet, which is roughly our recommendation. As you can see, there's 12, 12 basketball courts in the main hall that are convertible to 24 volleyball, 36 pickleball. And then they also have, kitchen, concessions, and food and beverage, some storage space, a large lobby space that ends up being probably about 20 to 30,000 square feet in itself for teams and families to gather. Offices, some medical space, sports medicine, things, training, things like that. So this is kind of a general concept that lines up with what we feel there's support for. One thing to note is these facilities are not like arenas where you'll have 5,000-10,000 fixed bleachers built that cannot, they're huge amounts of expensive infrastructure. They tend to have portable tilt and roll bleachers next to each court that can be moved around, configured. Typically, you could sit 150 people around any one court based upon, the team that's playing there for that hour, the teams that are playing there for that hour. And so these are much less expensive to build than, a 10,000 seat arena. You're basically building this large rectangular space and then surrounding it with the necessary lobby space and amenities. And then you just have the metal tilt and roll bleachers you can move around to different configurations. In terms of usage, I think this is a conservative number. In the model that we ran to get our economic impact numbers, we assumed about 25 annual sports tournaments. Most of the facilities that we look at across the country, especially those comparable ones, 20 to 25 is kind of the baseline. Some of those have gotten up to 40 plus over time as they've built their reputation on really being a primary go-to host for these types of facilities. So you can see those 25 events take up about close to 40% of the total available time in the facility. And that's because those are youth and amateur sports events. And other than about 2.5 months in the summer, kids are in school during the week. So you're not going to see a lot of, 3, 4, 5-day type tournaments outside of the summer. So most of that is going to be weekend use, besides the summer and some holidays. During the week is when the facility can be available for local use, whether that's renting to club teams that need more space, whether that's partnering with Parks and Rec for them to come in and run some programs. There's lots of different options for how it can be programmed during the week. In terms of usage, you can see we estimated about 431,000 annual visits to the building. And in terms of out-of-market visits, in total, we're estimating about 45% of all the visits would be people coming from outside of Allen County. Every time someone comes from outside of Allen County and spends even $1 in local community, that is net new economic impact. If a sports tournament draws somebody who would not be coming here otherwise, every dollar they spend is net new incremental impact that's tied to this facility. And when we show you our economic impact numbers, that's all that's going into our economic impact numbers. If somebody who lives in Allen County uses this facility, that's just, we view that as a transfer within that market. All we're capturing when we talk about our economic and fiscal impact is new money brought into this community from outside because of the presence of these 187,000 new people coming for tournaments that would not be here otherwise. So in terms of our annual economic impact estimates, that 187,000 annual out-of-town visitors, based upon our research that we've done in 100 plus markets across the country, we think that translates to about 21 million in net new direct spending. So direct spending, again, is going back to what I said earlier. That's money they spend in the facility on concessions or merchandise or whatever that might be. But more so, much more so, is what they spend outside the facility in your community. Hotels, restaurants, retail, family entertainment, and transportation are the 5 largest categories of spending in your community that come from these facilities. That money gets respent in your community, so that 21 million of initial spending by those visitors cycles through the economy and provides about 35 million in total economic output in the community as that money cycles through and then eventually leaks out. And that's calculated through the in-plan system that we use. Throughout the entire economy, it supports about 800, close to 900 annual full and part-time jobs. People always look at it and say, well, that seems like a large number, because they're thinking, oh, wow, a sports facility employs 900 people. That's not the case. Inside the sports facility, you're probably going to have 8 to 12 full-time employees. And then you're going to have a lot of part-time employees as well who help around events and things like that. That might be 50 or 60 people directly employed by the facility. The vast majority of this employment that's tied to this total output is happening in businesses throughout the city and the county. That's happening in restaurants, retail, hospitality, transportation, suppliers for food and beverage, things like that throughout your economy, and it ricochets throughout the economy. This is the number that the Convention and Visitors Bureaus always want to see. We're projecting about 54,000 annual hotel nights tied to these 187,000 tournament visitors. We go back and look at facilities that we've done these projections for and whether they actually achieve them. And we've built a reputation for being conservative, not excessively conservative, but for being conservative enough that, I tell communities that we want to show, the 25 weekend tournaments, the 50,000 hotel nights. Those are kind of baseline numbers that we are confident that any community can achieve if they build this facility and do even just an average job of executing on it. But we want to give you the tools and the recommendations and the strategies to beat those numbers. And so, for example, Virginia Beach Sports Center is one that we did a lot of planning on before COVID, and it opened about a year into COVID. We projected about 50,000 hotel nights a year there, and this past full year they hit 60,000 measurable room nights that were booked through room blocks with their Convention and Visitors Bureau, specifically for tournaments held in that facility. So that's what we love to see. We want to put out numbers in the planning stages that communities can say, we're confident we can hit that, but we want to do better. How that translates to taxes, this is different in every community depending on the type of tax revenues they have. So obviously the three primary levers here in the Fort Wayne and Allen County are the innkeeper's tax, local income tax, and food and beverage tax. So this comes out to about $730,000 per year in new tax money that would not be generated in this community without those new visitors that would not come without this facility. What that translates to over 30 years, those numbers, we run them out over 30 years and then we discount them back to today's dollars, is about 16 million, almost 16 million in incremental new local tax collections from innkeeper's tax, local income tax, and food and beverage tax, tied to the presence of this facility, and that's in today's dollars, so it's worth about $16 million today. Keep in mind as well, this is directly tied to the money spent by those 187,000 visitors on the days that they're here in Fort Wayne for this event. So if they stay an extra day or come a day early to have extra, to visit for longer, that's not captured in here. If a family comes every year for a tournament or multiple times a year for a tournament, falls in love with Fort Wayne, moves here. If a business moves here because of the economic development trends in Fort Wayne are improved by the presence of this facility and development, none of that's captured in this. This is really the impact of those 187,000 people. So the potential, I like to say, and one facility is not going to change the economic future of an entire city the size of Fort Wayne, but an overall commitment to tourism and family and economic development and jobs and everything that Jonathan and his team are working on every single day, and stacking up projects is what I like to call it. You have this beautiful Grand Wayne Center, the ballpark, new local use amenities that have been upgraded and improved, like libraries and things like that. As you start to build upon those, that's where you achieve success metrics above and beyond just this spending that's captured from those 187,000 people, those 25 weekends. So that's my presentation. I believe Alec, there he is, has some additional thoughts he wants to share.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. On behalf of the Redevelopment Commission and the Redevelopment Department, I want to thank Brian and Victus Advisors on providing this critical information needed to help us determine the right type of facility for the North River site. We know some of you may want to ask Brian some additional questions, so he will remain here for about the next half an hour or so if you're interested in connecting with him directly, and that goes for the media as well. Jonathan Leiss, the Community Development Director, and myself are available for questions as well. So thank you all for taking the time today to come and join us, and thank you especially to Visit Fort Wayne for being the sponsor for this event, and everybody have a great night. Thank you.